Welcome to the Religious Treehouse. I'm Matthew.
And I'm Jodie.
How are you doing, Jody?
I'm doing pretty well, Matthew. How are you?
I am doing okay. I'm getting over a little bit of a sickness, so excuse me if I'm coughing into the mic or sneezing or if my voice sounds a bit wonky. But we are pushing through. We are doing this podcast. I'm excited for this conversation. I don't know what your thoughts on this conversation are, but I'm excited for it.
I think it'll be a good conversation, just like our past ones have been.
Of course. Yeah, so we are continuing our series going through Mark Juergensmeyer, Terror in the Mind of God. We are on, what is it, chapter 3 or 4 now?
Or
And we're looking at Islamic extremism. So, obviously, disclaimers ahead. I focus on Christianity and Judaism and biblical studies and stuff like that. Islam is a step outside of my field of expertise. So take everything that I have to say, you know, henceforth with a grain of salt, and we can hope for the best. I would love, I like this is our first episode that we've done really that's talking about something outside of Christianity or Judaism, other than some alternative religious movements. We talked about Scientology and um, the one UFO religion whose name I
the
can't.
Seekers.
Yeah, the Seekers, um, which I for some reason have studied them more than I've studied Islam, but here we are. I'm excited for this conversation. Uh, Hopefully one day we'll get like an actual scholar of Islam and we can talk about Islam a little more.
Yeah.
But for now, we're going to do an awful introduction to Islam in talking about extremism and fundamentalism and violence in Islam, which, not a great way to start talking about a new religion, but here we are.
But the argument could be made based on what we're going to talk about. Are we really talking about Islam or the use of Islam to justify violence?
Yeah, valid. Like I think that's a good point because like the groups that we'll be talking about have had a lot of protests from many Muslims around the world, as have the Jewish groups and the Christian groups that we've talked about. Um, these groups do not represent the religion in which they stand for. So this is for people following along, trying to study new religions. This is not how you should start studying a new religion. You should not be going into what are the worst of the worst in this religion doing. Um, Sadly, this is how so many people do learn about new religions. Um, they start at, oh, my religion is perfect. What do they do? What do those people do? I know those people from when they did that one thing. That must be all of them. So I want to like drill this in from the beginning. This is not representative of of Islam. And I want to drill this in more so than I have in the Christianity and Judaism episodes because I'm not an expert on this, as much as I am on Christianity or Judaism, to whatever extent I'm an expert. Um, so here we are. We're talking about Islam. I'm excited for this. Let's get into it. Jody?
Let's get into it. We start off pretty strong, I feel, in this chapter. There's a line in the first one. They reject our religion and say we are not sufficiently Muslim, but they kill the men and rape the women. What kind of Islam is that? And I was just like, bam, there we go.
Yeah.
Right away. We're getting into it. We learned new words.
Oh, what words did we learn?
We learned Daesh,
Hmm.
which is what they call ISIS.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I really like about this chapter, or this book, is that he splits up into essentially three different uh, um, case studies of religious violence in Islam, and we kind of are going to be looking at ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and Hamas, step by step by step. And we start talking about ISIS, or as it's kind of called in Islam, Daesh, which means bully in that language, much to their chagrin.
I was like, that's poetic. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. That's cosmic kismet.
Hmm.
So the question that we first are faced with is ISIS motivated by religion or power?
Sure. And I think Islam is an interesting case study because unlike Christianity or Judaism, which we've already discussed, it its initial beginnings were so much entrenched in this religious slash political endeavor. Like when we look at Christianity and Judaism, there's some form of divide that we can see between the religious life and the government life of some sort, the political life. Whether that's a created differentiation that we have to make, or if that's how they saw it differently as they were being created. Islam, on the other hand, when it came to power, it was also creating its religion at the same time. So it's a lot harder to differentiate Islam and politics because of its origins in that sense there. So I think that's something we should look at. We should consider from the get go. Like obviously, it's not impossible, and it's very common to separate um, the politics and the religion. But I don't think we can look past the fact that as Islam started to grow, it grew as a political and religious movement at the same time.
Interesting.
But yeah, we have to when we look at these larger groups of religious extremists, we have to ask the question: how much of this is religiously motivated? How much of this is politically motivated? As we saw, particularly in our case studies with Judaism, a lot of those were very heavily politically motivated, and Christianity as well. And that's not going to be any different here either.
Well, I fear a lot of extremism is tied to politics.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what they do. And we'll get into that later about
Mm.
making, doing big acts to send a message to the government.
Right.
So they tell us a story talking about the religion, back to the religion of it. There is that story at the beginning where they talk about this man trying to cross a border, and he was asked
Mm.
to recite lines from the Quran, and he
Mm.
recited Christian Bible verses. I think they were, I don't know if they're New or Old Testament, but he was allowed to pass through
Sure.
because the man who asked, I thought that was an interesting story. It seemed that they weren't sure on the validity of it.
Yeah. And that, whether apocryphal or truthful, was is a way to kind of poke fun at the religiousness of ISIS. Are they putting up a front? Are there like average members putting up a front, or are they genuinely religious? And I think you could say this about any real group. I think, or any group like this, modern times. Like, go to your average church and like quote the Quran at them, and be like, "Oh yeah, that probably sounds like something that Jesus would say."
Yeah.
Um, I don't know, so many people nowadays are just not well versed in their religious tradition, which is why we're doing this podcast, because we think people should know more about their religious tradition and the traditions around them. Um, so read your
And
Quran, people.
I know you're right. And you're going to hate me saying this, but it's all Abraham.
What do you mean?
They're all Abrahamic religions.
Well, yeah, well, yeah.
There's some
Um,
shared history and thoughts.
yeah, I don't love the term Abrahamic religion. Uh, but yeah, there are
I didn't coin that.
no.
I didn't
um,
do that.
but yeah, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam do tend to get lumped together in a way that I think is sometimes appropriate and sometimes misguided, for
Do you
sure.
think there should be more separation?
Yeah, I think well, again, I know more about Christianity and Judaism. I think a lot of times we see it as succession, where I think maybe it's a lot better to see them as kind of sibling religions, kind of growing up together or alongside each other,
Mm.
rather than
Spin-offs.
Judaism leading in, yeah, as rather than looking at Christianity as a spin-off in Judaism and Islam as a spin-off of Christianity and Judaism. Um, and understanding that while the histories may have some of the same characters, the traditions differ, and those differences are important. Um, while like the similarity should also be celebrated. You get the drill.
Well, yeah, but that's interesting. And I think we should really work to get the Abrahamic religion phrase thrown out then. If you
Mhm.
feel passionately about it, let's get into it. Some things, topics. I was very curious about what motivated people
Mhm.
to join groups. So I liked this chapter a lot because they really went into it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think we kind of start with the topic of ISIS.
Mhm.
Um, and and first of all, when we see ISIS, we think of often like 2010s to like 2015s ish. Um, like that's when like the height of ISIS comes into our imagination, or at least for me. I don't know if that's the same for you.
Yes,
Um,
I would agree. It went Al-Qaeda and then ISIS.
right. So,
Right about them.
um, and what was happening around that time is there was
People were being
this.
recruited.
Well, yeah, but more so in the Middle East, in
Oh,
Iraq, there was wars and U.S. involvement in Iraq and power shifting between Sunni and Shia Muslims in that area. And as Shia Muslims kind of rose in power in some places, Sunni Muslims kind of saw themselves as marginalized and disenfranchised. And then we have extremist groups sprouting up here and there. And then we get the popularization of ISIS because of this feeling of isolation and marginalization from the dominant Shia groups of the area. Um, and
these are
that's
different ethnic groups, Shia and Sunni.
yeah. So Islam can kind of be separated into two main sects. As always, there are. See, I hate making these analogies across religions because I feel like it dissolves what we know about um, these religions. But to use the categorization similarities of something that we're more familiar with, we know in Christianity we have Catholicism, we have Orthodox Church, we have Protestants.
Mm,
Similarly, in Islam we have Sunni and Shia Muslims.
okay.
So those are going to be kind of the two main groups that make up all of Islam. And obviously there are many different ways to practice those different forms. There's many different ways to be Sunni. There's many different ways to be Shia, and those aren't the only two branches that you can be.
Okay.
We
Okay.
we can't get into like all of the main differences
Yeah.
here. What the main difference goes back to the beginning. After Muhammad, there's a question of who succeeds after Muhammad. So Sunnis, who make up the vast majority of Muslims nowadays, I think it's like 85%.
Mhm.
Um, give or take 5 or 10%.
Yeah.
They believe that after Muhammad are going to be the four rightly guided caliphs. And then, as history goes on, that goes on, yada, yada, yada. Shia believes in a more familial line. There's, you know, way, and these are kind of the starting points for the differences of belief and stuff. Um, we can get into that at another, all the details at another point.
Okay.
But
Do you decide which one you are? Are you born in to specific lineages?
yeah, I mean, well, this is, the problem, not the problem, but the problem of modernization, of modernity,
Mhm.
of in the modern society, what we have now is the ability to choose our religion in a way that we haven't had the ability to choose in the past. So, up until 50, 100 years ago, whatever religion we were born into is the religion that we were. Um, and then with the rise of modernity, globalization, there's a bigger outpouring of people choosing their religion. Am I going to be Christian? Am I going to be Jewish? It's a choice that I can have rather than something
Mhm.
you're really born into. Um, so, it really depends on what part of the world you're in. You can always convert to Islam, but a lot of the times, whatever you're grown up around, probably going to
Uh-huh.
be that form, that denomination, to use Christian language.
Okay. Okay. Cool. You learn something new every day. Honestly, I was cognizant of the news around this time with
Mm,
especially with like ISIS recruiting, but I feel like I learned so much from this book about the struggles in the Middle East. And
yeah,
I feel like I have a better understanding of that dynamic. Maybe.
right.
We'll
Yeah.
see. Let's keep going into it. So, yes, so Shia and Sunni, the Sunni, because I'll let you continue. I don't know if I
Okay.
could summarize it right.
Right. So moving on, we have ISIS trying um to get people to join. And I think this did a really good job because I think one of the things that we've talked about in our alternative religious movement episodes as well, is like how could you get involved with one of these groups? Like this seems so antithetical to what we understand as good religion. How can we get involved in this? And I think Juergensmeyer really put it interestingly in like the three categorizations, the three groups of people that kind of joined ISIS. The first being, the pragmatists, the people who did it because it was the thing to do. It was safest to do in that area, and that's going to be a lot of people from the Sunni regions of Syria and Iraq who felt they were disenfranchised by the Shia regimes at the time. So as this powerful revolutionary group comes up, is ISIS comes up, um, it makes sense to be part of that as a way to be unmarginalized, to have a voice. But then we have what they call psychopaths and believers. I don't know if I love that categorization, the titles of that, but I guess it makes sense because it often includes foreign, which British or U.S. or Western Muslims being kind of recruited in, and the reason they're recruited in, I think, is really weird and scary, but also, you know, in the margins. Also not like a common occurrence. Like, hey, these are on the margins, not like
Yeah.
your average Muslim.
Yeah. I hate to nitpick. It's interesting to me that you split it up into two categories when it was three different ones in my brain.
What do you mean?
Pragmatist, psychopaths, believers.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I didn't lump the psychopaths and the believers together.
I think the psychopaths and believers are lumped together in this book as a way to be like these are going to be your foreign. The psychopaths being the people who are like, oh, ISIS is actively trying to kill these people. ISIS is doing these bad things. I want to be part of these bad things because they're
Yeah.
doing these bad things. That's going to be the psychopath
Yeah.
aspect of it. The believers are going to be more so the ones that are like, oh, there is this cosmic war going on. I need to be a part of it because there
Yeah.
is this apocalyptic vision going on. So there are, no, I thank you for noting that distinction.
Yeah. Because I was like, okay, so there's three. And under the pragmatist, I put the people who were doing it for money
Sure,
because
sure,
they had to survive. When you're put into a situation like that, like it's yeah, be marginalized or be a part of the big issue.
sure.
And that's what they chose to do. But it's sad. It's sad that money is it's a good motivator for people,
Mm.
especially in times of
Yeah,
unrest.
yeah. But as this was on the rise in the late aughts, early tens,
Mm.
the their use of like chat rooms and like online resources to recruit people was like up there, like which is not something that we really see or that we've talked about yet. Um, and so they would recruit people who were drawn by this desire to be part of like a great war, this cosmic struggle, allowing them to like play out their fantasies of online role playing games while also adhering to their piety and like laying down their lives for their faith.
Yeah.
And the problem with ISIS is that they didn't really care too much about these people that they brought in, and that means they went through them quickly.
Yeah.
In
High
this cosmic,
turnover.
yeah, high turnover rates in this cosmic war that turned into real life war, high turnover for sure because of death and stuff like that.
Well, yes,
It
and they would use the
required,
women as sex slaves, and then the
yeah,
women would leave, and
right,
they needed more sex slaves.
yeah, and then
This
also their men would die. So problems, not good things happening.
nope,
Obviously, this is not,
bad.
yeah, this is bad. This is not, what Islam for the vast majority of Muslims is.
No, 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 no. And they go, okay, can we talk about how much America is in this book? I'm
Yeah,
sorry. America's in every section. They are up in every section.
yeah. Well, America can't, get out of stuff. We can't do that, Joe. Do you know we got to get our little fingers and everything?
No. was definitely really interesting to read some of the thought processes about how democracy was just going to make the Shia people marginalized again.
Mm,
Because we have to follow the logic.
right.
So I tried to follow the logic. I'm like, okay, there is this threat that under democracy, the majority would still vote in mostly Sunni people and the
Hmm.
Shia people would be marginalized. I'm like, okay, that I guess that would be a reason. That's not
Mm,
the reason they were giving the people in the chat rooms to recruit them, but from like the base of where it started, I guess. I don't know.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's
Well, I think well because ISIS for the most part is Sunni,
yeah.
um, which is the vast majority of the people. So
Oh,
if they went into the democracy, maybe not in that specific area. Syria has a little higher than average Shia population.
okay.
Uh, but yeah, the idea of democracy is antithetical to ISIS.
Yeah.
They see Western civilization as a plague in some sense, and they have no interest in inserting that rule
It's talking.
because there is this form in I don't like the term fundamentalism because I think that's a inherently Christian term.
Yeah.
Um, but there's this idea of fundamentalism of kind of looking back to the glory days, looking back to these, perfect times in the past. Often that's going to be the time of the four rightly guided caliphs. And so a lot of what's going on here is trying to recreate this this old form of Islam, trying to bring back the glory days. And that is going to be, reinstating the caliph and stuff like that, which is not democratic in any way.
They're trying to make something something again.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. There there was a lot here deciphering it. Do we want to talk about recruiting anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm good to move on to Al Qaeda unless you have anything else to say about
Well,
ISIS.
I just wanted to say that the guy who was leading ISIS made the Al-Qaeda leaders uncomfortable
Yeah,
with his anti-Shia platform. That was, I don't want to say a funny thing to read, but it was amusing.
sure.
I they were like, and he made Osama bin Laden uncomfy.
Yeah.
Didn't know that was possible. Because also I'm looking at this from my very basic non-religious studying
Mhm.
American view and growing up in America after 9/11. Like Osama bin Laden was this monster. He was the monster under your bed, in your
Mhm.
closet. He was everywhere. They were recruiting from everyone. Like
Sure.
they taking anyone. People would come back and they would say, "No, you can't." I do you remember that story about that one woman who joined ISIS and then came home and they
Mm-mm.
couldn't figure out if she was actually regretful or not? Anyways, um,
Yeah,
so
but I think that also goes to look at our as America's fear of the other of Islam of ISIS. And one of the reasons that I think one of the reasons that we fear Islam more than most other religions is because we don't know much about it. And I think if we learn more, if we become more aware of what they believe, what they do, I think it can solve a lot of problems.
to conclude the ISIS section, was it religious? Is it a religious
Yeah,
extremist group?
yeah. I think they have more to
Because their guy has a PhD,
right.
right?
Their guy's a PhD. The
So
leader,
what's his name
um,
again?
al-Baghdadi. He's got
Yes.
a PhD in Islamic studies, which is more than most other leaders of these extremist groups. And
Yeah.
they, were heavily focused on this apocalyptic vision of Islam, trying to recreate their original form of Islam. That, that being said, this form of Islam is, greatly unfamiliar and unrecognizable to the vast majority of
Yeah.
Islam. So I don't know. I think it's up to the viewer to decide.
It's in the eye of the beholder, if we were to go based on the book. And then Bin Laden's, um, what were his were
Al Qaeda.
no, I was qualifications.
Oh, he
He was an engineer.
I think he claimed to be an engineer. I think he had like a business degree or something. I
Okay,
don't
but nothing
remember.
religious?
Not that I know of, no.
No, no. Eat momhood.
Yeah.
I don't.
So yeah, let's move on. Let's move on to Al Qaeda,
Okay.
which that's going to be Osama bin Laden. That's the boogeyman that we're all scared of. Um, but yeah, I think Al Qaeda can kind of be compared to and he talks about this in the book, kind of be compared to what we talked about with like Timothy McVeigh and Anders Breivik. They had this political mission with this dedication of protecting this particular religious culture. So it's this religious ideal that they're trying to protect, but it's very largely this political mission that they're doing.
It,
And I
what's
think
what's wrong with modernization?
what's wrong with modernization?
Yeah. But
Um,
these people seem to all hate modernization.
yeah. Oh, I like modernization. I think it's kind of cool. Um, but the problem with modernization to a lot of fundamentalist groups is that it allows this could be a whole episode. Um, but it allows for the ability to I could be wrong here, but it allows for the ability of outside voices to infiltrate your ideas. It allows people to ask the question, what if I'm wrong? And if we ask, what if I'm wrong? We might answer that question with, maybe I am wrong. And if we do that, if we have these ideas coming in, because modernization and globalization has this, influx of ideas and ideals and, working with people from all around the world with all these different ideas. And if we start, accepting what they have to say, what their ideas are, it changes how we have to do the way that we've always done it.
Hmm.
And that's scary, and therefore we don't like modernization. I think
Okay.
I think if we follow the logic, it would go along those lines somehow.
Okay. I see that. I'm seeing that logic more on TikTok actually. The amount of people that are that anyways, anytime I see a religious fundamentalist video, there'll be comments saying, and this is why I like this religion, because they don't change their minds, because they don't change their things. And I'm like, but it's evolving.
Yeah,
There are just some things that are not okay. But anyways, following this logic, okay, I'm
yeah.
with you. I'm there. We hate modernization. Sorry, you were in the middle of thought.
Oh, but yeah, but because of, kind of the breadth of Al Qaeda, it
Mm,
can perhaps better be understood as like a movement of sorts and like a centralized organization.
mm.
There's a lot of groups out there that are like, oh yeah, we're also Al Qaeda because that like gives a sense of legitimacy to their group, and they're like, okay, cool, Al Qaeda, we're part of that. We believe similar things. We can lump ourselves into it. So Al Qaeda is this large extremist form of Islam that we can try to define, but I don't really know if that's going to be super helpful.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was trying to find the note I wrote on this because I'm trying to understand it. It's not an organization, but it's
Hmm.
a movement.
It's a movement. Yeah, like I feel like this is Al Qaeda is like a 2014 tech startup. It's like more than a company. It's a way of life. No. So yeah, I think trying to, reduce Al Qaeda to like a simple organization, I think loses out on kind of understanding what it is, but it's more so this like larger, you know, categorization to like you can fit yourself under.
And as Juergenmeyer pointed out, if you look at it as an organization, trying to dismantle it is impossible.
Sure.
And trying to diminish it, you can't do that.
Mm,
So, okay, we have this movement,
mm,
and the movement represents no modernization. Is that it?
sure. I mean, like there's a lot
There's a lot.
that goes into it.
And we
As
don't we don't care about his religious credentials. Do religious credentials even matter?
I mean, it depends on who the group is. Like it depends on if you care about religious credentials. Um, but I think I really like that he kind of zoomed in on Mahmoud Abu Halima,
Mm,
who is involved in the 93 World Trade Center bombing, who is also involved in the assassination of Meir Kahane, who we talked about last time.
busy boy.
And uh, and obviously he claimed to be innocent, as we would expect. And I
Mm,
think his idea of like not liking the word terrorist, um, I think we talked about this in our first episode, is that it's only used for, violence that people or the media don't like. I think that I agree with that. I
He
think
wasn't
he's right.
wrong.
I think he's not wrong.
He's not
Is it
wrong.
helping him out to like think it through this way? Absolutely,
No.
it's helping him out to think this way.
Mm-mm.
But I
I
don't
don't
think he's
even know why he gave an interview.
wrong. um, but like he brought up times when like the U.S. killed indiscriminatorily and was like, hey, the U.S. did Hiroshima. The U.S. gets its fingers involved in all these countries messing around. Like, can we think of them as this extremist terrorist group? Um, and again, following the logic, it's pretty easy to follow that logic. It's to like where we get the end where he's like, yeah, so we should kill people. That's where the logic is,
Yeah.
harder to follow. um, and he was very big on sending a message. If the
Mm.
people are, in this sense of great injustice, how do we respond to that? We send a message. So that's why he was involved in things like the 93 bombing of the World Trade Center, because that's something that can send a message. We look at the World Trade Center as, kind of the central point of, modernization and globalization. If you want to send a message against modernization, it would make sense to have it that there as the epicenter. Um,
Reading that if that truck had just been in a slightly different location, the towers and so many other people, like that if it that 9/11 would have happened earlier.
mm,
It was crazy to read. I don't think I had ever been told about that attack. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
so this that they were planning.
Mm.
There was planning that went into these things. Um, sorry, continue.
But yeah, so he, as Al Qaeda is want to do, kind of has this heightened view of Islam, this militant, strict way of doing, of practicing Islam. So when he sees other people practice Islam, like Egypt, he has this big deal against Egypt and how they have this watered down way of practicing Islam, and it's not like this real form of Islam because he's not doing it as strictly as he would want to do. And influenced and corrupted by Western codes of conduct, and then that gets into Sharia law,
Yeah,
which, yeah.
no, I still got bones to pick with this man, but we can do it after Sharia law.
And so like one of the concepts that gets picked up a lot in Muslim extremism is this idea of Sharia law. Now, Sharia law is another one of those boogeyman words in American culture where we hear Sharia law and we think, oh no, that's scary, that's bad, they're going to start killing us. No, Sharia law is a way of practicing Islam, the moral structure, laws, stuff like that, in which people can guide their lives around, and it's more so interpreted and followed than like this you know strict set of laws. Like in Judaism, we have the Torah and the Talmud and
Yeah.
stuff like that, where like you follow laws and stuff, and there's debate about what it means, yada yada. How do you do that? Or like the Constitution, where we have the Supreme Court trying to be like, hey, how do we follow these laws? How do we interpret these laws? And
Interpret
that's
the
how it is
Second
with
Amendment.
but that's how it is with Sharia law as well. It's not the strict set of guidelines that means if you do something, you're going to get decapitated or something. No, it's a way of interpreting law where some people interpret it in a way that, I think a lot of Westerners are like, okay, that makes sense to some extent. And then you have these extremists that are, rightfully, perhaps we should be weary of, that have these heightened versions of Sharia law that, like, yeah, sure, that's worrisome. But Sharia law is not the boogeyman that it's made out to be. Or it's not something that we should be super, super scared of. It's, a way of, morally guiding your own life and setting up ways to like follow your religion.
Yeah, sounds like it allows for a spectrum
Yeah,
of,
as all religions do.
as all wiggle room,
Wiggle room.
room to wiggle. May I go back to this man and this bone I have to pick with him?
Sure.
No, because he kept blaming secular society for everything.
Yeah.
And he was like, I went to Germany, I did drugs and a lot of women, and it was all secular society. You didn't have to do that. You didn't
Hmm.
have to make those choices. And then he continues on to blame secular society multiple times,
Yeah.
mind you. He talked about America's special condemnation. Okay, yeah, for the Egyptian government supporting the secular Egyptian government. And then again, oh, this was, oh, how do you say his last name again?
Oh, Abu Halima, probably.
Uh, Abu Halima compared a life without religion to a pen without ink. An ink pen, he said, a pen worth $2,000 gold and everything in it. It's useless if there's no ink in it. That's the thing that gives life. The life in this pen, the soul. The soul, the religion. You know, that's the thing that revived the whole life. Secularism has none. They have none. You have none. Number one, he missed his calling to write. He should have written. He should have gone to Germany, did the drugs and the women, and written, and he would be fine. Instead, we have found this extremism. And like you said earlier, there are points where he is not wrong,
Mhm.
but he's in prison for killing people.
Right. Because there are points where he's most definitely very wrong.
Yeah. It's just, but the complexity of this, of
Mm.
being able to like put into words, it's beautiful. I felt like it was beautifully put into words, his feelings.
Sure.
I felt that was well said.
Yeah.
And these are his direct
It's
quotes.
I think it was well said, but bad what he was saying.
Bad what he was saying. Very
Oh,
well said.
yeah. Because like he had this like respect for, US religion, freedom of religion. Like he felt like it was easier to practice his Islam easier in the US than it was in Egypt. But then he was like, but also I'm a little anti-Semitic, and your government and your media are a little too much influenced by Jews, and we don't like that. And then he's like, but also the U.S. is, in support of Israel and, enemies of Islam. But this isn't because of Christianity. It's just because you guys are, too secular. Um, and
Up and
this,
down, zig and zagging, man.
yeah, and this goes back to, this idea that I think a lot of these extremists look at is the inability to separate religious Islam from uh, uh, political Islam.
Yeah.
And I think we see this um, so much tighter. I think we see this much more tightly in Islamic extremism than we have in the past two episodes, because as Islam started, it grew both politically and religiously simultaneously. So it's a lot easier to conflate the two. And I think that's really what he's doing here. It's looking back to those good old days, back with the first four caliphs. You're like, okay, how can we get back to that as well?
Yeah. Was it both ISIS and Al Qaeda that were denounced by like global Muslim communities?
Yeah, I mean, I think Hamas too, to some extent.
Yeah.
Um, like all of them, for sure, have been denounced by global Muslim communities because they are, highly unorthodox in their Islam.
Yeah. Are we ready to move to Hamas now that we've
Yeah,
brought it
part
in?
three. Part three.
Part three.
Um,
Oh, another word I learned, blitzkrieg.
you didn't know Blitzkrieg? That one's German.
Well, I know it now. And guess
Yeah.
who will be committing a blitzkrieg on some cupcakes later?
Oh. Oh. All right. So one of the things with like Hamas is like the idea of suicide bombing. That was a common trope that happened a lot in some of their extremism. And we don't really have ways to talk about like how they think. Um
Because according to Juergenmeyer, they said they were by definition unavailable for interviewing afterward.
yeah, very accurate. But what we do have is a lot of pre-recorded videos that they did the day before their attack.
Yeah.
And we have these some examples that he gave us of like this one young man who's like smiling about what was going to happen, excited to be this martyr for like the freedom and honor of his people. And then other people kind of excited that like he gets to choose this destiny, like it's an honor to choose this instead of just like having a pointless death that didn't mean anything. That guy needs to read some existentialism. But well, yeah. But we get this fascinating interview from Juergensmeyer of one of the founders of Hamas, Dr. Aziz
Yeah.
Rantisi. My
Yeah.
bad. And like one of the things he didn't like, which I thought was fascinating, was that he didn't like that they were called suicide bombings, but instead preferred the term istishhadi, which meant the self-chosen martyrdom, which goes back to themes that we've seen in the previous episodes, is that we love seeing ourselves as martyrs. A lot of these extremist groups want to be seen as martyrs. So if we see these suicide bombers and we flip the script, not as these, impulsive acts by a deranged person, but as deliberate and careful acts done by a martyr, it does a service to flip their perspective of them and in seeing the effectiveness and power of these acts within the cosmic war.
That damn cosmic war. It's just lingering through all these episodes. Is it okay for me to like feel sad? Because these were mostly like young men.
Mhm.
Like I don't know if there was like a level of manipulation or something. Like, could they really understand the impact? Like their whole lives were ahead of them, and all
Yeah,
that's left of them are these videotapes. But then you think about the people they hurt,
right.
and you feel more sorrow for them. It's all sad.
For sure, for sure. Um, yeah, I think we should first and foremost, you know, be sad and mourn for the victims, but also I think there is space to mourn for those influenced by this and recognize that, like, hey, these are still lives being taken, even if it's their own for this. Like, hey, it's tragic that we have these extremist groups that are doing these things, and that should be mourned as well. But
Like,
I think
we don't have to go to extremism. We could talk.
yeah, but like the problem, the as we've seen, like the reason so often that we resort to extremism is when they feel unheard, when they feel marginalized, and they feel like talking no longer has any effect.
That's why we must make space for everyone.
And that's why we should understand more religions and the religion of those around us.
Yes.
Um, and we'll work at it piece by piece. But
Going back to Dr. Rantisi,
mm,
a lot of these guys that he's interviewed have seemed fairly normal
yeah,
when he talks to them. They're just talking,
yeah,
but then they're also making these plans and encouraging these acts, and
yeah,
because
yeah.
he's right, they don't force them to do it; they
Mhm.
choose to do it.
Right, and like we also saw with like Michael Bray in our Christianity episode, like he's just a run-of-the-mill pastor nowadays. Um, like a lot of these people do seem normal, and I think that's something we also have to understand with extremism. Like while it is few and far between, it's not these sociopaths and psychopaths. I mean, sometimes they are, but I don't think seeing that as like we have to follow the logic because there is logic to follow. It's not necessarily good logic. It certainly isn't good logic, but there is logic to follow. And I think that is what makes these people sound seemingly normal to some extent, at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that begs the question though of going back to the suicide bombings though, why would Hamas permit this? Um, like why would they permit like these killings of like civilians and children and stuff during these suicide bombings when like obviously in Islam that's a no-no.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to the cosmic war there, or in this case a little more specifically the war of Israel and Palestine. um and in this war there are no innocent bystanders. Everyone is involved to some extent, seen through this lens. So at first, Hamas only targeted soldiers and people like that, and then after we got some attacks happening, and like Baruch Goldstein, his massacre, they Hamas kind of said, okay, no, we're at war. We have to up our game. That justifies attacking whoever we want because we're at war.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they rationalized it by saying this is a moral lesson. We need to make Israelis feel the same way that they've made Palestinians feel. So Hamas fundamentally sees themselves as victims of the struggle, not the cause of the struggle. And I think that's why in the recent events regarding Hamas and Israel, it's a lot easier for people to um, to follow the logic of Hamas, because it's a lot easier to follow that logic and see them as the victims when you're up against an entire government.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
well, the book didn't really go into the circumstances regarding the occupation
sure.
and things like that. I feel it was boiled down a
Yeah,
little bit.
and you know we have to boil it down too because we don't have time for that. But
No,
for sure, this is a very complex situation that we don't have time nor the expertise to talk about with
but we
grace and
don't agree with
poise.
suicide bombers.
We don't agree with religious extremism.
No.
Um, but yeah, so a lot of this also sees there's this idea of like a secular liberation movement for Palestine that's also highly disagreed with from Hamas and their supporters, because to
PLO.
them there is no separation between a secular state and Islam, and Islam to them there's Islam, and having a secular state is an oxymoron. But yeah.
Getting into the PLO, I did the author Juergensmeyer got kidnapped, guys. He got taken to the PLO to talk to people
Hmm.
because he told his cab driver he was going to talk to someone from Hamas. And he said, "Ooh, wait, let me take you here first,"
Hmm.
and was not really given a choice. I was like, "Baller cab driver." He's like,
Yeah.
"I got a message you need to hear. Nothing bad happened. He just got taken to a secondary location."
Yeah, we love a secondary location.
Actually never go to a secondary location. But in this case, I feel it was the right move because then we got that different perspective of like Hamas keeping the PLO on its toes and that
Mm.
Palestinians were good with Hamas in that way.
Yeah, because they saw this, they have, two organizations fighting for them, so to speak. The PLO, which, is much more into, talking through the problems, but they see as not being super helpful. And then Hamas, which arguably is, you know, a little more into, getting stuff done, which often results in deaths and extremism and explosions. And again, this gets into very complicated territory, but this does result in more approval from Palestinians of Hamas than say other extremist groups.
Because they also did like volunteer work, basically. They gave money to people who lost their houses. They fed like fed and clothed people. There was
Yeah, and I think with all of these extremist groups, there's certainly ways that they help people as well. Like they
yeah,
don't do these things just to be how we would perceive them as vile and evil.
okay.
Like none of these extremist groups are doing it for the sake of you know cause of being vile and evil, how we would see that. A lot of them are trying to make the world better in the way that they see the world being better. Perhaps ISIS is a exception here, as they were very big on causing a big scene, but like they are trying to make things better in however way that works for them. But yeah, so yeah, Hamas, controversial group. Lots of things
They
happened with them.
but I just thought it was I just felt he had pointed out Hamas's charity work
Hmm.
for a specific reason. He hadn't pointed it out with ISIS or Al-Qaeda.
Definitely, yeah, for sure. Like I do think Hamas definitely had like their people like that they knew they wanted to take care of in
Yeah.
whatever way that looked, for sure. So Islam, generally speaking, is ambivalent towards violence. They're for the most part like, hey, don't hurt people. Like Islam like literally means like can be translated to like peace. So like they're big on like, hey, let's help people, let's do good things. And like most religions, justifying violence comes in certain places. Like, okay, if you're if you're being attacked, maybe that gives justification for violence. So as with all of these extremists, they take these and say, okay, we need to ratchet up to the extremes. We are under attack, therefore we have justification for violence.
Well, it's a cosmic war, don't you know?
Yeah, we're at war, so we got to do violence. Generally speaking, the Quran is less violent than the Bible. Um, and this kind of lack of violence in the Quran, some or the general lack of violence has led some activists to like plea for nonviolence. Um, so as we mentioned, these extremist groups are the outlier of Islam for sure.
Yeah.
But there is, ways to permit violence in the Quran in Islam, particularly like if you're being like aggressed against, as Juergensmeyer said.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, so like there's, this as we talk about like the holy or the just war theory, there's always, the Islam version of that as well. How can we do that?
I mean, this chapter of the book, I fear, was no more or less gruesome than the first two.
Of course.
Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, I feel were all equally
Mm.
represented. And also, I don't think it helps for people to count blood against different religions for their extremist groups, because I feel a
Yeah,
lot of religions would look at the extremist groups and go, they're not with us.
right.
They
I
don't
think we
sit
have
with us.
I think we have to understand that these are still, Islamic groups. These are still Muslim groups. Like we can't completely disassociate them from each other.
Yeah.
Just like we can't, completely disassociate, the Jewish extremists, the Christian extremists from
Yeah.
Christianity and Judaism. But we do need to recognize that they aren't, the vast majority. They don't make up, the sound doctrine, if you will, the orthodox view of Islam. Oh, I think at last note we should talk about is jihad because that's another one of those words that are
Oh,
thrown around there a lot.
yeah. That was a new word.
Often,
Not a new word. No one's ever defined it. They just keep throwing it around.
yeah, it's one of those words that are thrown around, sometimes translated as holy war, but can also perhaps betterly translated as like struggle or striving. And like a very popular interpretation of jihad in Islam is that it's like this more of this internal struggle, this internal fight against like sin and injustice within oneself. Um, and that's like how it's popularly interpreted in Islam. And then we get extremists that kind of take that idea and expand it in a much more literal sense, and use that as like justification to justify the expansion and political control of Islam, and conduct acts of violence. So I think when we hear the word jihad and a lot of these other words that we've discussed, it shouldn't be one of those words that we're like, oh no, that's a big scary thing. It most commonly refers to this like internal struggle to like be better to some extent, to water it down a lot,
Yeah.
but it's not a big scary word.
No, I'm just feeling very annoyed with people's urge to take this spiritual war to the physical world.
Sure.
Like
Yeah.
when I hear something like holy war, I'm like, okay, that's like a spiritual thing.
Mm.
So like I don't know. So now I must say I'm not as scared of the word jihadist. I
Ooh.
really wasn't before, but I'm more so less now. Islam's not a big bad boogeyman.
Right.
Is that like okay to say?
That is, I would say that's good to say.
I think that's good to say. And I think people need to,
Mm.
let's all take a breath.
Yeah. Everyone breathe and breathe. But yeah, I think that's all I have. Jody, any other thoughts?
Um, this has been a fun book to read, and I can't wait to pick it back up later because we're gonna have a few weeks of a break
Yeah.
from
Um,
TITMOG.
that'll be fun. But yeah, thank you all for listening. If you have any comments or disagreements or agreements or any other thoughts, please feel free to reach out to us and follow us on social medias such as Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Blue Sky, and then listen on like whatever you do podcasts on like YouTube and Spotify and Apple and Amazon, all those places. Email us at thereligioustrios@gmail.com. And like and subscribe and share and give us a thumbs up and tell your friend. Send this to your grandma. All right.
Your grandma would
Bye,
find
all.
us delightful.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh no, I went to turn it off and I can't.